Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more.
What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into episode 411 of the Tech Sideline podcast. The Hoop season is coming to a close. Virginia Tech men's basketball vies for a first-round bye in the ACC tournament, and the women, they could still go dancing. All that and much more coming up on episode 411 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We're recording on Monday, February 24th, 2025 from our high-tech studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. I'm your host, Carter Hill. To my right is our lead analyst and columnist, Chris Coleman. Across the way is managing editor David Cunningham. Nick Brown, our director of media, is producing behind the scenes, and we appreciate you tuning in on this Monday morning. Guys, it's crazy. The basketball season is coming to a close. I know David's schedule is still in full swing, but again, always fun to talk some hoops with you all. And tell you what, the men and the women have some interesting topics of discussion right now as we currently sit here.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the last week of the ACC women's basketball regular season. The men have 2 weeks left. We're almost to March. And I was sitting there thinking about it the other day. If the women who are on the bubble right now don't end up making the NCAA tournament, which it looks like right now they're on the good side of the bubble, it would be the first time since 2015-16 Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball have not made the
at
NCAA
least one
tournament.
of the two.
At least one of the two teams. And I texted this to Will Stewart. Combine that with the last time a Virginia Tech football team finished with a sub 500 record, and that was 1992.
So all three.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So this is obviously the men have dealt with a lot of stuff all year, and that team hasn't been very good. But I think the women might save that. They played really, really well yesterday. A lot of things to talk about, but March Madness is almost here.
Yeah, definitely excited to talk about the women. I do want to mention the men first off. 7-9 in ACC play. Kind of an interesting last week and a half. You feel like you're playing better, making some progress. You then lose to UVA at home. You then put up 5 touchdowns at Boston College, which was very impressive to do so. You lose 54-36, but you go on the road and you beat Miami on Saturday. You win that one 81-68. And nice to sweep Miami in a year in which, despite how good Miami is, it hasn't been what Mike Young has wanted. But, a nice win for Virginia Tech, and it's put itself in position to once again compete for a first-round bye.
Yeah, I don't think you can judge a basketball team on what happens in Chestnut Hill. Because, the same thing happened to Georgia Tech just a few days later. They went up there and got absolutely shellacked. It's just not a fun place to play. Fortunately, Virginia Tech turned that around against Miami on Saturday in a similar place where there was nobody in the stands. It's hard to believe those are two ACC basketball programs. From a fan support standpoint.
Sure.
There's just nobody at those games. I mean, there are much more exciting high school games you can go to across the country, and it's just to get a better atmosphere than Boston College and Miami games. You got to bring your own energy. Losing to UVA was disappointing. Knowing what we know now about Jaden Schutt having the flu and basically missing a week. I mean, he could barely play against 6 minutes against Boston College. He was out of it. Very nice of Virginia Tech to send him in here to do Triumph Spotlight with the flu, that week. But anyway, so it was bad timing. So you lose Jaden Schutt, and then you lose Rodney Brown at the same time. Combine that with losing Hysier Miller, of course, before the season starts, and you're down. Schutt did play, so I'll count him as a half a player. You're down 2.5 guards. So you're playing Rex Steiner and you're playing Ben Hammond at the same time in some of those games. In the 2 losses, those guys were on the court together. And that's not an ideal situation to be in. So guard depth for the 3rd year in a row, or lack thereof, has reared its ugly head yet again.
Yeah, but I thought the most impressive thing was the one guy who he hasn't really stepped up many times in his career, but he did on Saturday against Miami, was Jaden Young. And this is a guy who his career high was 14 points. He scored 27 at Miami. He's a guy who I think he can be pretty hit or miss at times. And I thought that was the most consistent I've ever seen him play on both ends of the floor. He was making the right passes. He was finding his shots. That comes off the heels of a game where the Hokies scored their fewest points ever in an ACC contest, 36 points. They turn around, and Jaden Young has 27 himself. Part of that might just be the difference not playing in Chestnut Hill. And also, Jaden Shute played a little bit, not a ton. But again, I thought one of the other differences was Virginia Tech really took care of the ball. And this team, you've seen the highs, you've seen the lows. Same thing with the women, what we'll talk about later. When this team is taking care of the ball, not letting teams get out and run in transition, pretty good. Hokies had 55 points off the bench against Miami.
Shout out Pat Wessler first half.
53 points off the bench. Yes. Patrick Wessler had 10 points. Ben Burnham had 14. Jaden Young has 27. Most points off the bench since it was 14-15, Buzz Williams' first year against Pitt, one of Tech's 2 ACC wins that year, and Adam Smith and Malik Mueller had like 50 off the bench.
Malik Mueller, what a name.
I know.
That might be the last name that this might be the last time that name ever gets mentioned on the podcast. It might also be the first time. But anyway, for 1 year.
But yeah, I mean, I think just having that kind of production off the bench, like the Hokies needed it this game. But I thought they were really good overall. To bounce back from a loss like that, I think it says a lot. Like they clearly did not play well in Chestnut Hill, and they turn around and I thought they played one of their more complete games of the season. Yes, Miami's not very good, but I thought overall, like, there weren't many nits you could pick with that Tech performance on Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, what's crazy too is, we were talking about just a minute ago, during the game, Miami basketball, or at least there was a report out there that Miami was pulling a Virginia Tech football in 2015 during the UVA game when Justin Fuente was named the new head football coach, because apparently Jai Lucas, the associate head coach of Duke, might be the next head coach in Miami, which is interesting because guess what? They play tomorrow. They play on Tuesday down in Miami. So
that should be close.
Yeah. Yeah, the broadcasters during the whole game were like, this doesn't technically mathematically eliminate Miami from the ACC tournament, but they do got Duke coming up on Tuesday.
It's really, the ACC's so bad this year that you can tell the announcers are really struggling to find positive things to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, why do you think they keep talking about Toby Lawal's 49-inch
every game?
Yes.
Every game.
Every open.
Miami is so bad. I mean, Virginia Tech has scored, 81 and 86 in their 2 games this year against Miami. Miami might be like the worst defensive ACC team I've ever seen. Like this is a bad year for the ACC. So how does Miami only win 6 games? Like overall, they only have 6 overall wins. You have to be really bad. Like in a normal ACC year, Miami wouldn't have won any ACC games. They're that bad.
Yeah.
And they don't appear to care. Just their players look like they're going through the motions. Mm-hmm. Even Matthew Cleveland on the bench the other night looked like that's exactly where he wanted to be. That was his facial expression. Their coaches didn't look like they cared after the game because they all know they're going to be gone at the end of the year. So you're just going through the motions. I would be really angry if I had contributed to Miami basketball.
You mean if you had paid Lynn Kidd that giant amount? To, somebody said that Lynn Kidd was making like an average of like 83. They've won 6 games. He's making like an average of like $90K per win this year.
Really?
And the thing is, that money. It's NIL, so that means that money is out of someone's pocket.
It is. Yep. Yeah, the results were not produced. There's no doubt about that. Well, the thing is with Lynn Kidd, and like it talks about, this is something that lends itself to Miami basketball as a whole. But like to your point, Chris, like on paper they should actually still be a pretty solid team.
I think that Miami team has more talent than Virginia Tech does.
I would agree.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, Bill Courtney, who's a former Virginia Tech assistant, and all I can say is there's a reason why Jim Larinaga left.
When your coach quits in the middle of the season, that's
an indicator of how
right.
bad it
like
is.
you've been coaching for decades. Like if your team is just, unless they're just really not fun to coach, you're going to finish the season out.
Yeah.
Right? It just must be a bad group to coach.
Yeah. So Virginia Tech now, I mean, I think this is like that was again, granted how bad Miami is. I thought Virginia Tech played a very solid basketball game. Like I thought Tech was fine defensively, did what it needed to do. I thought you mentioned Patrick Wessler. Like he comes off the bench, makes 5 of his 6 shots, grabs 5 rebounds to go with his 10 points. Elijah Poteet goes out with an injury, which Mike Young said it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything really serious. We'll ask him about it. I'll ask him about it later today, probably in an hour. He said it didn't seem like there was any structural damage to it. It just seemed like Elijah was in some pain.
He didn't have an ice pack on it when he came back to the bench.
So that's a good sign. But you lose Elijah Poteet, your starting center, late in the first half, and you play the entire second half without him. And I thought they didn't really skip a beat. And again, granted, the competition, but I thought Patrick Wessler stepped in and played pretty well. I thought Toby Lawal was pretty good. Overall, they got a lot of contributions from a lot of guys. Ben Burnham was good. And then, Jaden Young, like Carter and Nick and I have joked, like, Jaden Young, once he makes one shot, it's like he's on. Like, and then there's always 1 or 2 times a game where he like pulls up and there's a heat check. But on that game, he was on. He even got to the rack a couple times and some crafty layups. And that's something like if Jaden Young can bottle that, he didn't have to go off for 27 every game. But if he can go off for 12, 14 a game, be a little bit more consistent.
Add an extra element to the offense, and that he's really the only guy that can get to the rim and finish around the rim.
Correct.
That's an extra added element. So when not everything has to or can be scored off a set play, off a set offense. Sometimes it breaks down, and you do need guys to make plays, and he's the guy most likely to make that play. So if he can get a little more consistent on that, that would be great. We'll see. Like I said, Miami's defense is atrocious, but hopefully. Y'all laugh when I say that, but it's true.
No, 100%, 100%.
It's horrible. But sometimes confidence for a basketball player or a football player or whatever sport is very important. So hopefully his confidence, not to suggest that he was unconfident before, but hopefully that next time he gets on the court, he's a bigger believer in himself than he was before.
Yeah, you are 100% accurate when you say their defense is atrocious. So you got 4 games left to go in the regular season. 25th ranked Louisville tomorrow night at Castle Coliseum. Syracuse on Saturday. North Carolina next Tuesday. And then a trip to Clemson on Saturday. So, David, you got the Cardinals in town tomorrow, 9 o'clock inside Castle. Can you preview Louisville and Virginia Tech? Should be one of the more challenging tests for the year for the Hokies in ACC play, but they have been, well, I'm going to say this. They've been okay at home recently because, obviously the UVA game happened, but you play SMU close, yada, yada, yada. You play Wake close. Virginia Tech actually hasn't won in Castle Coliseum since January 15th. So this is an opportunity to get back in the win column at home and would be a nice win to kind of vault towards the end of ACC play.
That was the NC State game.
Yeah.
That's forever ago. By the way, Miami's adjusted defensive efficiency is 336
out of 364 teams, something like that.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Louisville's a really good team. This is, I think, Louisville and Clemson. Like this is not an easy final 4-game stretch for the Hokies. Like Syracuse is not very good. That's who Tech has this upcoming Saturday. But Louisville's very good. Clemson's very good. North Carolina teetering. It depends on what Carolina team you get, whether they're on or off. I've been very impressed with this Louisville team, Pat Kelsey, this year. 22nd in adjusted offensive efficiency, 31st in adjusted defensive efficiency. They make a lot of threes. They don't make it at a high clip necessarily, but they take a lot and make a lot. Chucky Hepburn is kind of the guy who makes them go. He's a transfer from Wisconsin, a point guard, and he was the he's kind of been their best player in the last handful of games this year. He had 29 against Florida State the other day. So they've got a really, really good backcourt, really good all over. And it's funny because Pat Kelsey came in from College of Charleston, Ben Burnham's former coach, and kind of reshaped this entire lineup, entire roster. Tells you kind of how bad of a coach Kenny Payne was, that he could only scrounge up like 1 or 2 wins at Louisville. Pat Kelsey comes in, and this team is 21-6 and 14-2 in the ACC. And those 2 losses, they lost to Georgia Tech on the road, and they lost to Duke.
Right.
So they beat Clemson way back in early January by 10. So this is a game, I think, for Virginia Tech. I think the Hokies have played all right against some of the better teams. This, I think, might be Tech's best or hardest challenge yet at home of the Clemson, of the Syracuse, of the SMUs. I thought Tech did a good job of hanging around with Clemson, had an opportunity, couldn't quite get over the hump. SMU, Tech was there. SMU, just better players made better plays at the end of the game. This might be one of those situations, but we've seen Mike Young's teams play some really good competition, very tough in Castle. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's close at the end. But again, this is a Louisville team that's going to make the NCAA tournament and is really, really flying.
I think there's only 3 teams in the ACC that I would qualify as good, as an NCAA tournament team, and Louisville's one of them.
Louisville, Clemson, and Duke.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I don't think. I mean, SMU has talent. I mean, when you look at them, but they haven't beaten anybody. They had a chance to beat somebody recently, and Clemson handled them easily.
Right, and all their quad 1 opportunities, they've lost by like an average of like 18 points.
Smacked.
Yeah. It's just not going to compute to an NCAA tournament.
To me, I just only see like 3 teams in the ACC worthy of the NCAA tournament. They're just not very good.
And Wake was right there.
They don't beat anybody either.
Well, and on top of that, too, with Wake, just like every single year, they lose a game you can't afford to lose.
Right.
One, you lose to Florida State at home a week ago, and then you go to NC State and lose on Saturday. You can't do that.
No, you can't do that. There's too many good players on that team. Well, he's been there for 5 years, and Wake puts good resources into their basketball program. They haven't made an NCAA tournament. They got good players on that team.
They do.
They need to move on.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Steve Forbes is this is his 5th season, and he will not have made the NCAA tournament. He was the ACC Coach of the Year, and he's had an ACC Player of the Year, and he's had really, really good players. And it's tough because I think he's a good coach, but for whatever reason, they slipped up in a span of about 14 days or 10 days. They slipped up against Florida State and against NC State. 2 things you can't afford to do. Those are 2 teams at the very, very bottom of the ACC this year. So
they got like 3 players in that starting lineup that could play for any team in this league. Start for any
Wake,
team.
For sure. Yeah.
So this Louisville team, good. If Virginia Tech's got Syracuse on Saturday, that's a game I think Tech has a really, really good chance to win. And then you got Carolina. Again, what Carolina team are you going to get? I think that's a game Virginia Tech could win. Then you end with Clemson. So, like Chris said, final 4 games, 2 of those teams are going to be playing in the NCAA tournament for sure. So, not an easy way to end the year. I think my guess would be Tech finishes with about 8 or 9 ACC wins. You get at least 1, if not 2.
People are saying that Carolina still is right on the outside looking into the NCAA tournament, and I'm just like, we're going off a name brand here.
Yeah.
Because when you break down, I get like their strength of schedule is really, really good.
Right, and they lost all those games.
Right. The one win they have is UCLA. Yeah, exactly. You're 17-11. You're whatever you are in ACC play. Like if you replace North Carolina with Boston College,
nobody would say they were in the
exactly. Exactly. Flipping to the women's side. So the Hokies lose a pretty brutal one on Thursday to longtime ACC rival Stanford. You come back on Sunday and you beat an even longer ACC foe in Cal, 87-84. I'll tell you what, that may have been the win of the year for Virginia Tech, David, because other than the Louisville game, first off, Castle Coliseum, awesome atmosphere yesterday. What a response for the Hokies. And I'll tell you what, I think it puts Virginia Tech back in a position to get to the NCAA tournament.
I agreed. This was on Friday morning, ESPN's Bracketology, Charlie Cream updates it every Tuesdays and Fridays. And on Friday, after Thursday's loss to Stanford, where Virginia Tech was up by as many as 12, played really good 30 minutes, and then was really bad in that final 15 minutes. I started scratching my head going, I don't think Virginia Tech's getting in the NCAA tournament. Like, Tech has to do something really good down the stretch here. And it had to start with that Cal game on Sunday. And to Virginia Tech's credit, on senior day, where you're honoring Matilda Eck and Rose Mishaw, Hokies came out and they were the better team for 40 minutes. I thought they played really, really well. They shot the ball well. Got some of my notes here from the game yesterday. Fewest turnovers ever in a game ever, 5.
Impressive.
It's
hard to do.
Only 5 turnovers. They had 1 in the first half. They had 2 up until the fourth quarter when Cal was pressing, and they turned it over 3 times. Much improved after a 22 turnover game against Stanford. Again, I've been impressed this year so much by the way the Hokies bounce back from tough games, bad losses. After the Syracuse game, people were talking about, that's a bad loss. Yes, at the same time, I thought Virginia Tech's response against UVA was great. And you could see that Tech really the players took what they learned in that Syracuse game, how bad they played. They took it to heart, and they turned around, and they played one of their best games of the season at UVA. And I thought after that way that Stanford game ended, they turned around and they played one of their better games of the year against Cal. Now, you can't afford to drop any other games this year and learn from those mistakes again. But all in all, I mean, Hokies were really, really good on the offensive end. I thought more than anything, their execution in crunch time was terrific. That's not something they were able to say after Thursday's game against Stanford. They've been a little bit hit or miss at times this year. Even going back to the Carolina game 2 Thursday ago. Virginia Tech neck and neck with a really good Carolina team, a top 15 squad in Chapel Hill. Hokies only made 3 field goals in that entire fourth quarter. I thought this performance down the stretch was the type of performance a Virginia Tech team needs to have as the NCAA tournament approaches. As you got to play your best basketball at the end of February going into March, and I thought you saw that on Sunday.
I think we've had this conversation a lot this year. It's for every Virginia Tech big win is canceled out by a bad loss, and vice versa. And they keep, like you said, I've been impressed by the way they've responded. It always seems like their worst moment is followed by their best moment. And a lot of times it's within a 3-day span, which just shows that they are mentally tough enough to put bad things behind them. Now, that being said, long term, you have to stop doing that. They've shown the ability to learn from their mistakes, but at least we think they have. But if that keeps happening, then really they haven't, right? So we'll see. There's not that many, just 2 games left this year in the regular season. It's really interesting where they are. I think they're about where we thought they would be, right on the bubble. Still the last team in, supposedly. Yeah. It's interesting that I've never done a direct comparison men's basketball to women's basketball with, but you couldn't make it in with one quad 1 win on the men's side. Parity has improved a lot in the women's game over the last few years, but it's still not it's still nowhere close to the men's game in terms of parity. Sure. Your top women's team isn't going to lose, basically, right? There are fewer losses amongst those top teams in women's basketball than there are for men's basketball. You just don't see as many upsets and things like that, which probably means there are fewer quad 1 wins to go around for bubble teams, unlike men's basketball. So maybe for women's basketball, those quad 2 wins become more important, and in which case Virginia Tech is 4-1 in those games, which is big. I feel better with another quad 1 win, though. Virginia Tech, whether you talk about men's or women's basketball, NCAA selection Sunday when you're on the bubble has never been particularly fun.
This is the first time Tech has been on the bubble on either side, truly on the bubble in since the Seth Greenberg era.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
They were on the bubble in 21-22,
right, and then they won the ACC.
ACC tournament. So
But this is the first time since like on Selection Sunday they'll be
sweating it out.
Now we say that
Unless they win the ACC tournament.
well,
or unless they like
or
lose
if they
out.
lose to Boston College or Clemson.
yeah, that's the and so Chris, I'm gonna draw a little comparison here. I'm sure you remember where you were, where you watched that game. Maybe you were at the game in February 2011 when Virginia Tech beat #1 Duke on the men's side.
Yeah.
You remember the
I remember where I was 3 days later too.
you remember
When they lost to Boston College?
Yeah.
So they lost to Boston College and Clemson that week.
They beat Duke, and then the Boston College game wasn't even close. That's the sad part.
They
about
lost
it.
by 15.
Yeah. I mean, they
Was BC good?
they were NIT.
NIT? Okay.
Yeah, like they were a solid, but that was in Castle, and it wasn't even like a gradual. They smacked Tech from the very beginning. It was typical Seth Greenberg teams get up for the big games, and then you don't have to. There's no pressure when you're playing Duke because you have nothing to lose. There's just a lot to lose when you're playing Boston College, and that's where Seth's teams never. That's where they struggle to get over the hump.
So the reason I bring that up is because Virginia Tech has Boston College and Clemson this week. And I just found that funny because it's like this is an opportunity to solidify that you are an NCAA tournament team. Obviously, beating the #1 team is a little bit different than beating a really good Cal team that was the top team in receiving votes, so 26 technically. The Hokies can't afford to slip up in these next two games. From everything I understand, Tech's probably one or two teams good to the bubble right now. So not the last team in, but one of the last four, probably like the third to last. If Tech wins these next two games and then is able to win a game in the ACC tournament in Greensboro, I feel really good about their chances. You end the year on a 4-game winning streak. That would be another quality win in Greensboro. The tough part here is there's no margin for error, none at all. And I thought you were talking about parity earlier. One of the interesting things about the bubble, what Charlie Cream wrote on Friday for ESPN, is that the bubble is very weak this year. This is an odd year for the bubble. In the past couple of years, the bubble has been very, very strong, where you've got a couple mid-majors that are very, very good. Even if they don't make or win their conference tournament, they're getting in. You had a 30-win Fairfield team last year, for example.
Yeah, like that Florida Gulf Coast team that beat Tech.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was ended up being a 12 seed.
Right.
You've got some. You don't have as many you have some really good mid-major teams, but you don't have as many on the bubble. And so as a result, like there's this weird gap for Virginia Tech this year, where Tech's kind of in not a no man's land, but like an in between a little bit where, and even when you look at the ACC standings, like the top 8 teams in the ACC standings, they've all clinched at least a single bye, and Notre Dame and NC State have clinched a double bye. Virginia Tech has to win one game to clinch a single bye, but it could also still end up playing on the first day of the tournament, right? You're in this weird in-between stage. But I agree that this is kind of exactly where we thought Virginia Tech might be. If you can overachieve a little bit, you're going to be in the conversation come Selection Sunday. What you can't do is you can't slip up in these final two games where you've got to go up, play on an ice hockey rink in front of 10 fans in Conti Forum, and then go play what is a pretty good Clemson team on the road in Little John. If the Hokies can go 2-0 this week, I think they're in really good standing. They'll get a first-round bye in the ACC tournament, but that's easier said than done, and we just saw the Virginia Tech men's basketball team go up and have great success in Conti.
They're the Conti Forum, so that's where BC Ice Hockey plays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've only been in an arena once and been out on the court when the ice is covered up, right? And that wasn't for basketball. Like in 1991 probably, my parents took me to WCW Wrestling in Greensboro. Like a house show, wasn't even a television, right?
Uh-huh.
And whatever Greensboro minor league hockey team there is played in the Greensboro Coliseum. Yeah. So they put the wrestling ring out there, but basically they had plyboard on top of the ice. And we had ringside seats, like second row or whatever. So you're sitting on top of the plyboard. Like I had to put my jacket on because the coldness was just coming up from underneath. It's weird environment.
When they were building the Lenovo Center in Raleigh, the Hurricanes played in Greensboro for a couple years. So I wonder if that was around that same time frame when.
How long have the Hurricanes existed?
I'm not a hockey guy. Yeah, 30 years. Yeah, probably 90s.
Maybe, yeah.
The interesting thing is that's the only other. I think that's the only other place I've been to where.
Capital One. So
Oh,
DC.
true.
Oh, the
That's a little
NBA
bit
team plays
different.
there. So yeah.
Yeah.
So DC and Raleigh.
But Raleigh, I mean, that arena, like I remember a couple years ago after it was the 21-22 season after Virginia Tech beat NC State and then the PNC Center or PNC Arena. And literally like not even half an hour after the game, they were flipping over the court from basketball.
Yeah.
They're putting the ice back out there. And it's just like, and I'm going up to Boston this week, so I will get firsthand full experience of no crowd there on an ice hockey rink. But I, again, like this is an opportunity where you don't want to be that 2010-11 Virginia Tech team. You got to finish the season strong. And I thought what the Hokies did yesterday was it showed that they were an NCAA tournament team. Like I thought. After that Stanford game, first 30 minutes, they look like an NCAA tournament team. And we've seen them look like that multiple times this year, for the majority of the year. But there have been 1 or 2 or 3 instances where it's like, I don't know. And Thursday was that. You can't blow a 7-point fourth quarter lead at home and then end up going to overtime where you had multiple chances to win the game. But the Hokies responded. And if they can finish the year strong, Boston College, I said going into these final 2 weeks, I know you remember what I told you. I thought that this Boston College game was going to be the toughest game yet. Or toughest game of the Final Four, Stanford, Cal, BC, and Clemson, because it's on the road in front of nobody. And Boston College is actually a decent team who plays a style where they try to beat you up. They're very, very physical. Elizabeth Kitley last year left the Boston College game with a knot on her forehead.
I remember that.
So this is a game where Virginia Tech has to come physically ready to play, like physically ready to bang around, and in some ways leave with scratches and bruises.
Yeah.
And even the games in Castle against BC last couple years, single-digit games at the end, or like right around 10 points. So it's not going to be easy going up there. But what I think back to that Pitt game when Tech went up and played in front of literally like
250 people,
200 fans
Yeah.
in Pittsburgh, and Tech brought its own energy. And I can see a similar thing this time around.
I'm trying to look up so BC played SMU at home this week, and I'm trying to look up the attendance because that was in Chestnut Hill. But while I'm looking that up, okay, so to your point about the ACC tournament, Virginia Tech right now would be the 9th seed. Right now, if the season were to end today, they would play Georgia Tech in the second round. Likely, barring something crazy, that probably will be the matchup, I would think, assuming Virginia Tech.
Well, Georgia Tech and Cal play.
Oh, that's right. That's out west, too, isn't it?
Yes. So that will decide who's the 7 and 8 seed,
And
essentially.
Obviously, then you're matched up with Notre Dame. You cross that bridge when you get there. But again, if you can find a way, like if you're in that spot and you play Georgia Tech or Cal and you can win that game, that's another big win on your resume. And I know like there's this big debate every single year, like how much do ACC tournament wins really help you? But when you're the last team in, it certainly can't hurt.
Well, what were you just talking about, Chris? You don't know. You don't think if a ACC men's basketball team only had one quadrant one win, they could get in the NCAA tournament? Well, here's the thing. On quadrants are different on a neutral court. If Virginia Tech plays Cal or Georgia Tech on a neutral floor right now, that would be a quadrant 1 game.
Right.
So that's an opportunity. Like that is a special opportunity. That is
the neutral court is top 50, right?
correct. So that is like, think about that, right? You're sitting here, you only have one quadrant 1 win. You finish the season, you win these last 2 games, and then you get what I would call maybe a golden ticket, where you've beaten Georgia Tech and Cal this year, and you have an opportunity to play them again on a neutral court. You beat one on the road, one at home. That's a quadrant 1 win if you can get it, right? And yes, sure, Notre Dame lies down the road, but like it is, the ball is in Virginia Tech's court, so to speak, right now. I think the Hokies have a really, really good chance, but again, it comes down to being mentally focused and and honestly, in crunch time, making the right plays. Carter, there was that sequence yesterday, sequence on Thursday night. End of the game, about 15, 20 seconds left, and Virginia Tech went to inbound it, and Lonnie White was trying to inbound it in front of Tech's bench to Carly Wenzel, and like threw it, and Carly like couldn't really corral it, and it bounced off of her, and she tried to save it in, and then Stanford caught it, called timeout, whatever. Tech botched that sequence. And Tech ran a very similar play yesterday. And I thought this was one of the defining moments of the game. Tech runs a similar play in the final minute and a half. Clean inbound, ball works his way around. They get the ball down to Rose Mishaw on the block. She scores a layup and puts Tech up 3 or 5. Better execution
Yes.
in key moments. If Tech can execute like that, like, you're going to win some basketball games down the stretch, and that's what you need to be doing come March.
By the way, the attendance for Boston College SMU was 1,100. So maybe
I highly doubt it was 11.
I do too. I do too. But I wasn't there, so I can't. Hey, credit to the Eagles for getting 1,100 people in there. So Boston College, Virginia Tech. That is on Thursday. What time was that game, David? 7 o'clock. ACC Network Extra, I assume. David Cunningham will be in attendance at Conti Forum in Chestnut Hill, so it should be a fun finish for the women. Did get a question about this, and I did want to bounce this off of you real fast before we wrap it up. Matilda Akros, Mishaw, they're gone after this season. So you do have a nice younger core coming back, but at the same time, if you're Virginia Tech, how many transfers do you maybe bring in after the year comes to a close?
Well, the answer is we'll see. I say that because, as Chris knows, like it all depends on who decides to stick around. Ideally, Virginia Tech keeps Carly Wenzel and Karis Baker and Lonnie White and Mackie Nelson and Samaya Suffren and Layla Wells and Kale Peterson, and that's the 7 who have really played, along with, of course, Mishaw and Eck. Ideally, you keep all of those, but we know in today's age in NIL that doesn't always happen, and that kids might leave. I don't know what the situations are going to be. It seems like, and one of the things that I think is most impressive about the way Megan Duffy has constructed her program in this first year is the camaraderie, the chemistry. It's there. Like you can tell that the players enjoy being around each other and playing with each other. You at least need, I would say you need probably 2 bigs. How the Hokies attack the offseason is going to be interesting. I would say Carly Wenzel and Karis Baker, like 1A, 1B, they're the top 2 players you need to return. You need to come back. But you're going to need at least 1 big to, a 5 to go alongside Karis at the 4. The other part is, and I think Tech could go out and get that, but then where do you shuffle somebody in? Do you find somebody who can maybe play alongside Karis? You play her at the 5, you play a little bit smaller, right? I would say you probably need at least 2 bigs. Maybe, I don't know if you want to go get another point guard.
Well, Samaya Suffren comes back too.
Yeah, and so again, it's kind of going to be how the staff evaluates what it has. You've also got 3 freshmen coming in, 3 top 100 kids, who I think could all have an impact. So we'll see. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, Tech's got a lot of talent. How do you find the missing pieces? They're going to need at least 1, if not 2 bigs. Need a little bit more depth there. I think you'll see a bigger role for Kale Peterson next year. The bottom line is there's a really, really good core returning. Think about this. You could have Carly Wenzel, Lonnie White, and Karis Baker all back next year. 3 of your 5 starters. Can do one of the current guards on the roster pop in to that starting lineup? Or do you find somebody, right? And then you need a 5. So there's going to be some turnover. I wouldn't be surprised if Tech got 3-ish players to come in. But again, it could always be more depending on if other people leave.
Yeah. All right. What is coming up on TechSideline.com? You got the men coming up on Tuesday against Louisville. The women on the road at Boston College. Baseball, softball in full swing. Wrestling, a big win on Friday. It's all happening on TSL. So what's going on TechSideline.com?
I've got an article coming out later today on Montgomery and tempo when he's run offenses in the past. That's what I've got planned for the day. Obviously, I'll have my Friday Q&A. I don't know what's coming in between.
I think we are. It has not been confirmed, but when Travis Wells was in here talking to us the other day for the Philip Montgomery interview, he mentioned that I think we're going to do like we usually do, where we talk to assistant coaches on Tuesday night before the Louisville men's basketball game, so tomorrow. So I expect Andy will have some interviews, maybe you as well, some notes from talking with all the football assistants. I've got a bunch of basketball stuff. I'll be up in Boston on Thursday, back for Syracuse on Saturday, then Clemson on Sunday and then we've got to figure out, depending on what day the women end up playing in the NCAA tournament or ACC tournament, excuse me. I think we're trying to have a special guest on the podcast at some point next week, and right around when the men play Carolina. So it's going to be a busy next couple weeks. Like the real grind for me starts. But we've also got baseball, softball, and wrestling. Shout out to Jack Brisendine for the great story he wrote on the wrestling match. They killed NC State. Won 7 of 10 matches.
Yeah.
Just
a blowout.
A typical thing when NC State comes to Blacksburg. We got a lot of baseball, softball stuff. Sam Mostow and Chip Grubb have done a good job covering softball. Big win against Alabama on Friday. Not so much yesterday, but still a pretty good weekend overall. And then baseball. Dylan Teft has done a really good job for us. They played today. A weird series shifted back a day. He wrote a really good story on one of Virginia Tech's freshman arms who came in yesterday, first ever collegiate start, and pitched really, really well. So a lot of good baseball, softball stuff coming up as well. And softball's home this upcoming week in Salem.
Yeah, kind of at home.
They're playing a tournament in Salem.
Yeah, at the Moyer Sports Complex. So they just redid that. So it should be a fun weekend. But yeah, you're right. Baseball, softball in full swing. Wrestling, ACC co-champs in the dual meet side of things. And then, yeah, basketball. The grind continues for David Cunningham. So it should be a fun next couple of weeks. So anything else? Cover everything?
I think you got it.
Nice.
Cool.
Nick, appreciate you producing, as always. For Chris Coleman, David Cunningham, Nick Brown, I'm Carter Hill. Thanks for tuning in to episode 411 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and we'll talk to you very soon.